Hey there, I'm Pops, and welcome to another What's Your Story, where we talk about, I don't know, life lessons, words of wisdom, advice, things like that. And with me, this great guy, animation guru himself. Man, talking about a dude that loves animation. We're going to talk about that with Abomination AJ. My brother, how are you, my friend?
I'm great, sir. Happy to be here. Happy to talk about the art form that I think got me on the path to creating now. So yeah, I'm excited about it.
Yeah, no, I think it was one of the things that had set you apart very early on as I was getting exposed to you and our little fellowship fandom circles and that kind of
Mhm.
thing, was that you have such strong affinity for the animation art, and then almost like an aversion of some of the live actions. But if we can go back to some of the beginning, is there certain things from like your childhood where you kind of put your finger on, like, this to me is just more special, and you've never kind of let go of that, so to speak?
Well, pops, yes, I know this story as I've kind of gone through my childhood and figured out where this has come from. Because you're wondering, and I've been thinking about this as well. And I was on Floral's channel, Floral Under a Rock, and I got to tell this story. But I think I'm pretty sure my love for animation came from my childhood. So I was adopted, and what my mother told me was that the Lion King was the only thing that would calm me down. It's kind of like kid in a new environment, acting out, crying, tantrums, all that type of stuff because it's unfamiliar uh, territory, this unfamiliar place. And she said that was the only thing that would ever calm me down is watching The Lion King.
Hmm.
And I believe it because she said I went through a whole bunch of VHS tapes, popping them in, constantly rewinding, playing, and went through a bunch of VHS tapes as well as VCRs. But I know as a kid, I watched that, and I talk about the storytelling, the emotions in that movie, being able to take animals and make them walk, talk, sing, not exactly anthropomorphic to where they're walking around, not so human, but being able to take these animals, draw them, and invokes so much emotion and do so much storytelling as well as the songs because it's for kids, so all of the colors, um again, the songs, the jokes, the gags and whatnot, amidst all of the story of like loss and responsibility, family, doing you wrong basically, or betraying you, putting so much trust in a person. So I got a good level of those lessons in my cartoon, in my animation, in my movie, in The Lion King. So I know for sure that's when I wanted to go into animation. Now, as I grew older and got into and I went to actually to school for it, then I changed my major to illustration because animation takes a whole lot of work. And you're not exactly uh animators don't exactly create the art. They take the
Mm.
art and make it move. So I was like, no, I want to see my art. I want to see my style. I guess in a way I want to direct it. Like I want to have my hands on all of that. So I moved into illustration and figured, okay, so I can start making comic books. At least that way I can. Uh, and I thought about this. It's like you're a director because you have to think about, okay, what does the shot look like? How much information am I putting in a panel? Stuff like that. So that's where that love for animation has taken me, and I still plan on doing like cartoons and making animations. I got stories that I'm working on, and have art for. But I'm pretty sure that's where that love came from. Uh, and besides that, I mean, any cartoon that I could come across, anything animated, I'm just so attached to it. It's an amazing uh, medium to tell stories.
Isn't it fascinating that The Lion King, this 1994 film for kids, full of all this music and bright colors, like you say, has stakes that modern cinema appears to be afraid to do. we
Agreed.
we kill the alpha male as a life lesson to make everyone else dramatically impacted, and obviously his son's life is transformed and changed. But we can go through whole seasons of shows and things like that, and you're like, there are really no stakes whatsoever.
Exactly. There are no lessons learned. I'm just being lectured. No universal truths. No story that everyone can relate to. It's like you have to be this color or a member of this group because this represents you, as opposed to, like I said, something that everybody can enjoy.
And you're not even allowed to criticize like an empty character. Like I was just getting someone, it's a very mild mannered comeback from somebody when I made a comment on Nope. I don't know if you've seen Nope or not.
I've seen it. I
thought it was garbage, and
I detest it.
I guess I made an offensive turn, so you can tell me how offensive it was, because I said Keke Palmer's character is like ghetto trash. Like, why would they have her play this horrible, unlikable, obnoxious woman who talks like she's living in like the ghetto of an inner city, even though she comes from this wealthy Hollywood family? Like, they were okay. They're not like they're in California. They're doing just fine for themselves, but she's acting like she's been living on the streets and she's cussing every 2 seconds, and she's this deplorable person, and she ends up having like no real story arc. She kind of has like a survival moment at the end, but it's not like I'm convinced she's a different person from it all. This person was so offended with how I handled my diagnoses of the Keke Palmer's character lack of story arc, and I'm like, well, you were talking about Lion King, and I thought to myself, I want to say it's racist, but it was at least on a certain sort of message that they were going with the hyenas. It was so much more dynamic and interesting with how they handled the hyenas than freaking Keke Palmer's character. I know that sounds, I'm more like a student of the craft, and I'm watching these things, and I'm like, all these reviews were how great she is, how great she is, how great she is, and then I watch it, I'm thinking, the brother is actually like at least a heroic character. Like, he's at least trying to do good things. It's very stoic and generic, but at least he was trying to be a good man in the grand scheme of things.
Yeah, and continue with his father had that legacy to keep.
And he goes back to save people he barely knows and things like that. Like, okay, fair enough, but you're not allowed to do that kind of stuff, I guess, in modern cinema.
It's become so much. It's gotten to the point to where even, Young Ripper speaks about this a lot, but somebody like myself, I share the same skin as these characters that you're talking about. And if I say something that's not praising them or just stroking them for the smallest things that they do, then somehow I hate my race. I hate my color and whatnot. But me and my wife watching this movie, and we're just like, okay, what did she just say? Like, we don't even know what she's trying to say, and that's not how she talks normally. So you can tell that it's forced, and at the same time she's the more intelligent one of the siblings, because when it came for them to do the presentation or the commercial, and they asked the brother, and he's just like sitting there with this dumbfounded look. But as soon as she comes in, she's talking, she's pitching it, she knows the history. So it's like, okay, you're giving me two different characters. Not saying you can't be ghetto and intelligent, but you have to make it make sense, and it did not. And for us, like I said, me and my wife, I was in the hood or raised in the ghetto more than she was, or longer than she was, and like I said, but we couldn't even understand what she was saying, to the point we had to rewind it. It was very annoying. I have my issues with Jordan Peele because I feel like he does take advantage of the culture, the black culture. But whatever. People praise him for being quote unquote original. That's not enough for me.
It can be original. It's very generic is basically how I felt his last couple films have been. And he's basically become Ryan Johnson to me. It's like they've had a couple moments, but those moments were so long ago. There is an expiration date on what have you done for me lately. Like,
right.
I don't think you're nearly as clever as you think you are. But All right, so you go ahead.
As far as the hyenas though, so I had a teacher back in high school, and she told me that Lion King was one of the most racist movies ever.
Okay,
And
that's an extreme. That's a hot take, but okay.
and she said it because of the hyenas. And she said you take her James Earl Jones as Mufasa. She said you take the most white sounding black man to play the lead, and then you have black Whoopi Goldberg and I think it was Cheech Marin as Bonsai, the hyena, and then you have a handicapped person. So she was on the wokeness back in the day, which I'm in high school. I didn't know what was going on, but I was like, you're not going to take the Lion King from me. I love that movie. And some people say it's racist to color code or race code characters or whatever, but I do. And the reason I do sometimes is because I know no decision is made without reason. So if I'm seeing like a Michael Bay's character, for instance, in the Transformers with the twins with the gold teeth and couldn't read, stuff like that, they were coded before I decided to do that myself. So I'm just recognizing, I'm just paying attention. But I think the Lion King, it understood what it was, and it gave you, I would say, both sides. So yes, you did have a black Whoopi Goldberg as a disgusting hyena. But at the same time, you had, again, Mufasa. You had James Earl Jones, this regal black character, just the actor, voice actor, not the, he was just a lion. But it's like you had both sides to that story. And it was done in a way that I think it was honest. I think if more, as opposed to all this representation and whatnot and all that, just be honest with me. Give me, like, I would have loved to have seen Robert Downey Jr., Iron Man and War Machine. I would have loved to see those characters have like actual back and forth, maybe some race jokes. I know they're trying to appeal to kids at the same time with that, but if you're honest and they speak in the way that actual people speak from different races, we take digs at one another, but we love each other at the same time. I like that. I appreciate that, and I respect that, because you're being who you are and you're putting it out there, as opposed to like what modern Disney does. Oh, we love black people, we love Asians, we love this LGBT community and whatnot, but their characters are terrible. Like I said with Lightyear, okay, well, this is all representation. You have white guy Buzz Lightyear surrounded by all these brown people, but when I go to the toy section, I only see white Buzz Lightyear, and I don't see those brown characters. So it's like, don't lie to me and tell me the story is for me. Yeah, just give it to me straight, and I will either I like it or not, and I'll move on about my day. But if you come out and do all this virtual signaling, then I feel like you have something to hide. Then I want to call it out, because now you're trying to use my race, my skin, as your shield. Kind of like with Reva and Obi-Wan Kenobi. I know we're supposed to be talking about animation right now.
We sidetracked, so I guess we'll keep going though, because we're having a good time. And the funny thing is, I took heat for my Kenobi take, by the way, and I said repeatedly, by the way, before we get to Reva, I have all these other issues first.
Exactly.
Reva was so fourth on my list of major complaints, and I don't mean like little complaints, like nitpickers. Like, no, we're destroying canon. We're doing this. Before we got to her, I have no idea how she was teleported out of inner city Baltimore into a Star Wars universe to be a character that doesn't look like any of her brothers or sisters. Like,
exactly.
I don't understand how that worked, but it did.
I'm not even the biggest Star Wars fan. Like, yes, I have it back there. Okay, I love the universe, but I'm not married to the movies, because I grew up with the games and I read, a lot of the some of the comics growing up. But Reva, it's like, if the Sith don't foster individuality. So there's no way that this black woman would have these braids in a style that's too that's
she doesn't look or act like an inquisitor. Like, there was nothing about her ever. In episode 1, she walks in the room, she doesn't look or act like them. She's the impulsive one. She's the one that's screaming at the clouds when the ship pulls away. She's just like, it was the dumbest thing I'd ever seen. And then I wish I could be in the room with the creators and ask them. I said, I know you think you're really helping Black representation and Black women and stuff, but so explain to me her stupid plot, her idea, and her scheme was to try to dupe Darth Vader, and just like I want to understand that you think that makes her look good. Because her plan and her scheme is so retarded. I don't see how that's a positive representation of female Black women who probably are at home yelling at the TV about all sorts of like other ideas that are way smarter to do than what you've made this character do.
So that is another issue that I see with these companies and them trying to portray Black women. So, you know, we've heard the aggressive Black woman or whatever, but Reva had no respect for authority. And Sith, well, I understand she wasn't a Sith, she was an Inquisitor, but as soon as you step out of line, you suffer for it. Like I recall reading the actual comic with the Inquisitors, and one of them tried to challenge Darth Vader. No, actually, they had to go up against Darth Vader. I forgot the circumstances, but Darth Vader told all of them, I'm going to teach you a lesson right now so that the thought of like crossing me doesn't even come in your mind in the future. And he destroys all of them, but just to teach them a lesson. So I'm watching this and just saying, like, how is she getting away with this? How has she not been dealt with already? Like, just stuff like that. Before it's not even about the skin tone. It's not even about the color. It's about them not even getting these characters or understanding that world first, and then throwing these elements in there. Like going back to the Lightyear thing, they want to make it so much about, you know, people had issues with the gay character. My issue wasn't the gay character. My issue was you've taken Lightyear, you've made him something that he wasn't. And I made a video on this because once you see in Toy Story, for instance, which this is supposed to be the actual character that movie is, the toy is based off of. And once you see Buzz Lightyear, he speaks to Woody. He's like, oh, local, you know, law enforcement. So he's talking to him. And as the other toys approach, he immediately throws Woody down, throws his body over him, and aims his lasers at the creatures. And I'm like, okay, this is a man that will gladly put his life on the line for somebody that he just met, because that's what's right. That's what he should do. He's competent. Immediate action when there's a perceived threat. But I didn't see that character. I didn't even watch the Lightyear movie, I'm gonna be honest. But just from the trailer, seeing that incompetence, because they had that part where I said there were no aliens in this movie except for that one tentacle that you see wrapped around Buzz Lightyear. He's just like, like he's panicking. What do I do? And the Black character that they made his superior just effortlessly, calmly slices the tentacle, and he gets up like a buffoon. But it's like, who is she? Why is she here? Besides the virtue signaling, because they also his catchphrase to infinity and beyond. Now it turned into something where they push fingers together. So I'm like, you're breaking canon, and that doesn't make sense, because if this was the movie that Andy's mom took him to see, then instead of Andy running around the room as Buzz Lightyear with his costume saying to infinity and beyond, you would see that moment with him and his mother where they're doing the finger thing. He's like, Mom, come play Space Rangers with me. Something like that, where it would make sense, but you're breaking it just to tell this story. As well as in the montage of strange things when Buzz was like, when he was there and he was combing the troll doll's hair. You know, the troll doll, little ugly thing, and it had the tall, like pink hair,
rainbow looking hair. Yeah.
So he's combing it, and then he's throwing his hand, like, you know, like I guess in a salon, they're like, girl, I heard this. So I'm like, he's doing that. So this character is already inclusive as you need him to be. This man clearly has no issue with LGBT characters. I love Buzz Lightyear, so I have no issue with these characters either. But you're using this movie to push that in front of it. Make it about that, because then I always see the gay stuff with Black people. I see it, you know, everywhere, the masculine women. But I think with that, such as like the Woman King or Wakanda Forever, it's always Black women have to be put in a position. Reva as well. They want to be in this position of authority. But with that character, you pair her with this Asian lady, and then they have children that look just like them. But that doesn't make sense. And people will defend it saying, well, it didn't focus on that. It didn't talk about it, but it gave, this is another reason I'm glad we're talking about animation. Currently, these people don't respect children enough, the intellect of children, to think they're going to ask questions. Or maybe they knew that and they were just like, that ain't no nuts. That's up to the parents, but we're being, stuff like that.
I kind of want to get to that because obviously the news of the day, because the news of the day, and this goes back a minute, because my wife, we're very devout, faithful people, and her finger's been on the pulse for a while, back to like, I don't know, something very innocuous like Finding Dory, right? The stroller is being pushed by two moms, right? It's like literally like 3 seconds. It was made into a thing. And
I did not pay attention to that.
Yeah, it's like just this one little piece. I think it's in Finding Dory, right? And then I think there's another the way they handled, I think, LaFleur in the Beauty and the Beast live action. They made a bigger thing that he may be effeminate. Not even saying he was gay, he's effeminate. And there's an effeminate moment in the animation one as well. My wife's big buzz with it wasn't so much about the aversion to the LGBT community. It's like, but why, if they're doing this, they're forcing me to possibly have to answer questions or comments from my kids. Yeah. And that's not their job to do for me. I'm having conversations with them. They don't know anything about me. They don't know anything about my friends and family or whatever. But because they're putting this in the show, I have to answer questions about, well, why does so-and-so have two moms and dads in the show and things like that? And this has really come into light now because every single animated show has been derailed because they have to have an inclusive, we were talking about my grandkids love a new show called Bluey. And I was telling my wife that I was really enjoying watching it with the kids. She goes, oh, no, they ruin it. It's like the third season or something like that. The friends come over. It's a lesbian couple. It's like so now you have to answer, well, why do they have two moms? Or one of the most famous ones my kids used to watch was Arthur, the Aardvark. I think they're supposed to be Aardvarks. I'm not whatever they are.
Yeah.
They derailed a whole episode into the teacher being gay and a wedding ceremony that the kids had to come to. I'm like, they did what? Like, what is happening? Like, I don't, and I think that's what we're moving in that direction where agenda versus just the natural course. Do they even care? I don't, I wish I could say I couldn't attribute malice to them, but now we have them confessing that it was on purpose. Like we have these behind the scene videos where these creators have said now, and some of this stuff dates back a couple years. I know things have only come to light within the last 18 months or so, but reality is some of this stuff dates back to 2018. And you're like, oh, it's been part of their agenda this whole time. Yeah. We're just now understanding that.
I think it's been normalized enough to where they're comfortable, they're bold enough to actually admit it now.
True.
I think because I was watching The Proud Family, and there was this one character, and it's never, I'm not exactly opposed to representing or seeing those characters on screen. My issue is when you focus on that, especially when they are a secondary character. Because a lot of the defense will be, well, hetero relationships are always seen. You always see the characters kiss, but that's not the goal. It happens, and you go on a journey with that character, and then it happens. It's not the focus of, oh, we have to get married and we have to show this love and all that, unless the story is that. But for the most part, just a hero's journey. That happens at the end, and then it's nothing. Whereas these, they focus on it and they highlight it. Now you were saying with Finding Dory, no, that bypassed me. I didn't notice it, but I'm starting to see it be more of a focus the more it's being normalized and being accepted. So with the Proud Family thing, there was this character named Myron, and he was always, effeminate. You could say he was gay. But it was a kid show, and his dad was the coach, tough dude who's always like actually saying something about his feminine son. Well, now in this continuation, this modernization of the story, now he's a main character, and he's like all the way just gone with the gay stuff. And okay, if you want to put that in there, understandable. He was a character already. Now we just want to make him a main character. But then they take the straight character out, who's the straight black male, who's also very intelligent. They took him completely out of it. So it's not like you're just representing this character because they're here, they're normal. You have to take this one out at the same time. So there's no balance. And then that was the first episode. The second episode, we're focused on this guy named Makeup Boy, like some influencer who does makeup tutorials and, you know, just that type of stuff. So I'm like, okay, you're coming straight out the gate with this stuff. And then as I do more research and you find out what one of the creators, one of the head people working on it, said that Disney, she said this was not the Disney that I used to work for back in the day, where we couldn't do stuff like that. She said, now I was hesitant, but nobody stopped me in my not so secret gay agenda. So she said, if you see anything gay in this in the show, she was like, no, that was me. She was like, it's just everywhere. Sort of proud of it because it's accepted. It's accepted now. So we're definitely going to see way more of it, more of a focus on it.
And I just want to interject because there's something that I have because I come from, you know, such a long background of dealing with movie reviews and media and all of that. I had actually done a book review way back in the day, just because I'd prepared for something else. And I read one of Ben Shapiro's very first book. It's about primetime propaganda. He basically used his like Ivy League credentials and his California credentials to kind of like dupe these Hollywood people into talking about their shows and movies. And they're very transparent about their agendas, primetime propaganda, right? And it was about, you know, the creators of Archie Bunker and all through the 70s and the 80s, and how they really knew they were shifting culture. They were interjecting things on purpose. They were purposely putting these things in there to normalize and desensitize and all of that. And this book, the only reason I bring that book up because it was very eye-opening to me, because like it's like you said, once you see it, you can't unsee it. Like you have this sort of awareness. It's like a red pill moment. Like the world you see is not what you think it is. And next thing you know, you're watching older shows and stuff. And you're like, oh, wow, I never picked up on this. I never picked up on that. And now the curtain's been pulled back on animation. And we're all sort of like analyzing and looking at it differently. And I don't even have a problem. Like let's say we're taking your Myron show. And you're going to have the gay character. And he's going to have the gay content creator, episode 2, whatever. If that's their show, then fine. Then you let it stand on its merits. But when I don't like it, I'm not allowed to be called an isterophobe. Like, you don't get it both ways. You don't get me to be an objective critic and tell you what I think. And you're fine with it in this circumstance. But then I'm the same person and I'm objectively telling you what I don't like about the show. And now I'm an istenophobe. And that's my biggest critique. It's like, if they want their stuff, that's fine. It's not going to make any sense to me. Like, we'll go full circle to Kiki. I think she's a crap character. I thought his character was fine. It's just a very generic character. I don't think he was unintelligent. I think he's more like a common sense kind of person. He like worked on the ranch. Yeah. He was fiddle to his dad. He didn't really know. He had no comfort. He was not comfortable at all in front of people. And she just puts on this front and this shenanigans. That's fine. But you're not above reproach when I criticize these things. You don't get to have it both way, Jordan Peele. You don't get a free pass to say, oh, I liked you as a critic when you liked Get Out. I liked you okay when you were hard on me, but you still kind of liked Us. But now you're an ist because you don't like this one. I'm like, no, you don't get it. You don't get that. That's not fair. We don't get to play this game. And that's what I think animation's doing. You know, they want to come at me and go, oh, no, you like Lion King and you like this stuff and we're happy with you then. But now you're bashing. I wouldn't even watch Lightyear. I was like, I have no interest. It really had nothing to do about all the agenda stuff we talked about. I just didn't want to see them destroy Buzz Lightyear for me because Toy Story is so precious.
Agreed. I did not watch. I did not watch their movie. I won't watch it. I watched the Lion King remake because this was early on. I knew it was going to be a soulless remake. I wasn't so aware of the agenda. And I had nieces and nephews, so I took them to go see it.
I couldn't believe how hollow and empty it felt. I was mortified of how bad it was. Because I thought that the Jungle Book was okay. I didn't think the Jungle Book was great. I just thought, okay, this is fine. I mean, we're not allowed to call things okay anymore, by the way. I don't know if you know that, AJ. Like, it used to be I could give something like a 2.5 and 3 stars, and there was no real objection to that scale back in the day with a 5-star thing. Nothing got a 5. A 5 is like once every few years. Oscar movies and the really, really great things are usually the 4-star movies. But now, because you don't give something like an 80 or a 95 on freaking Rotten Tomatoes type levels, there's something wrong with you. I watched Jungle Book and I was like, it's all right. It's fine. I'm not sure I'd sit through it again, but my kids like it. Grandkids are fine. Okay. So I went into Lion King going, I don't know. Looks pretty bad. And for you, it had to be devastating.
I knew what I was getting myself into, but again, I thought it was just a soulless remake. I wasn't aware of agenda, really. And as I go back and I do my research, and I hate Jon Favreau as a creator. I know nothing about him as a person, but as a creator, I can't forgive what he's done to the Lion King. But he said the important things about their movie, the highlights were the casting and the music. And if you pay attention, the casting is mostly black, except for the servant roles. As in like Zazu or Timon and Pumbaa, who are the goofy best friends that takes Simba off of his mission, off of his destiny. And the music, Pharrell was the difference in the music. And the casting sucked and the music sucked. So you forsaked the creativity that you could have put into because the foundation has already been done. You can only go up from here. Mm-hmm. So instead of focusing on a great movie, you focused on, let me just get black people in here who have no business doing voice acting. Let me get Pharrell in here who just want to put his black spin on things, and everything doesn't need that. I can understand seeing stories told from a black perspective, but that doesn't mean you have to make it blackety black. For it to be that. And
is that a bumper sticker at the AJ school? The blackety black black.
Don't
black black.
Don't make it blackety black. But that's what that was about. And I'm like, there's no way.
It just says blackety black black with like the red slash.
With the red, yes.
It's so offensive. It's so perfect. I love it so. I should do that because that's even more offensive that the white guy would do it. I'm like, oh yeah.
And if I have the sticker on my car and I get out, they go, "Oh, you one of them."
You're like, yeah. Okay, we've driven all over the map, and I really want to pick up off of animated Lion King though, because that's just this one sort of like foundational piece. But you are like, I hear you, and you'll be like on your show with Ego, for instance, and you guys are down a rabbit hole. I mean, like these shows and the order you watch them in is just excruciating fan love for the art and the media of animation itself. What are some of the things that you gravitate to, that you appreciate, that is just as important to you today as it was back then?
As far as animation?
Yeah.
Like the handling of it?
Compared to like live action. So let's take Batman. Like, I know if I had AJ and I got to put him in a chair and he's going to pick Batman animated series over any of the live action nonsense every day, all day.
I definitely think back then, comic book stories, if we're talking about like comic book stories, they definitely did respect source material. And I think it was they did a great job of actually representing or bringing lesser known characters to the story. And then that way they can stick in your brain, and you want to visit and go check out those comics, those stories. I think animation doesn't have any restrictions. If a person can see it in their brain, you can get somebody, if you can't do it yourself, you can get somebody to portray that that visual. And seeing how something like color or line weight, the shapes of characters can evoke emotion, as well as the
Okay.
music does that. But if something has like sharp lines, or real, it's not real clean, then you can say that character is like, let's say like Rasputin from Anastasia. And then with the green and just elements like that, but it's all art. I didn't have to pull some actor that knows how to portray this villain. I can draw, and then you get the voice actor, of course. But then you take somebody like Anastasia, more rounded, more clean lines, more flowy, with the hair, with the clothing, stuff like that. I do think kids subconsciously like pay attention to those little things, like Scar, for instance, when he's singing "Be Prepared," and he said, "Be prepared for sensational news," and he like throws his hair back and it's flowing, so that makes you think Scar is great at portraying himself one way, but he has all of the, like, he has ulterior motives. There's something that he's trying to get, but he can't reveal his plan just yet. And again, all of that is from art. Now, what I say with the no restrictions thing is, I would the DC animated movies, for instance, I would rather watch those 10 times before I watch any live action DC movie. Because without those restrictions, I can see a Batman do crazy martial arts that I'm being told that he does in a comic book, or if I look up a bio, I can see that because someone looked at what that martial art looked like and they simply drew it, as opposed to having to pull an actor in who doesn't know how. So then you have to get a stunt double, somebody who actually knows how to fight. It's just too much of that, and with that comes more money. But they bank on, I think, the actor and it looking realistic, that it takes away the believability, or the suspension of belief, that you can get from animation, as well as
There's this big word called verisimilitude. Like there's certain, like a believability, a sense of real that we can get our brain around. And in like comic books and animation, certain things will work. Like I just did my review on I'm on season 2 of the X-Men animated series, and like Mr. Sinister's been in it, and like Shadow King. And I'm like, as I was watching them now, I'm thinking to myself why certain pieces would work and not work in an adaptation. And of course, we're getting ready to see this because they have MODOK in this in this Ant-Man tragedy. So I think you're absolutely right. And the verisimilitude is like, you have to, in the live action part, because now you're even more connected. With animation, it's almost like you're in the universe, an animated universe, a playground where all the rules are a lot more fluid and a lot more dynamic, and you have more flexibility. But when you're in live action, you're like, okay, well, I'm in this live action world. Like if gravity is a thing, you're going to have to explain why they can defy gravity. If they're supposed to be human, you're going to have to explain why this doesn't kill them.
Right.
You know what I mean? Things like that. And that, I think, is part of what you're saying, at least a baseline part. And then what you're really going into with the line depth, different color palettes. Now you're getting into the artistry of it all. Like you're getting into just a talent that in the comic book field is few and far between right now, brother. It's all Cal Art, Berkeley Prep type color palettes. And I'm like, there are no primary colors in this comic book. Like, I don't understand. It's very distracting. It's very confusing at times. But you have a love for, the Teen Titans, the Warner Looney Tune type stuff, and things like that.
Love it.
That give me a break on why Looney Tunes still holds up so well. Why does Looney Tunes work? Because Looney Tunes seems like it should have dated out. Like it seems like I don't. Again, I'm being foiled. Again, you know,
I got you. Yeah.
It seems like on the surface,
Yeah.
it should have aged out because some of Hollywood has, right? I just did a video with Magitech Mags. You know who Mags is.
Yes.
She's an old soul. Like she's an old soul in that body, right? And we were talking about old cinema. I got people. We were talking about people who won't even watch a black and white movie. It's like I'm supposed to take these people seriously, and they haven't seen these AFI top movies of all time where the craft was created. Like this is where they invented it. This is where they made it. Like these shots, these dynamics were not done until these people did it. They won't even pay attention to any of that. Looney Tunes is the same kind of thing. He's telling incredible animated stories. He was incorporating, I mean, there's a whole line of Looney Tunes that are in public domain because they're basically like war propaganda. They were basically owned by the government. That is an incredible thing that is also very, very old. So it should have dated out in theory, and it hasn't dated out. And I don't, why? Why isn't it dated out, AJ? Why does it still hold up?
So I've been doing this because I want to incorporate a lot of this into my work. And so I'm just like, okay, what is it about Looney Tunes that just makes these characters just stick with me? I know for sure my love of animals, like I was saying with the Lion King, I knew I loved animals. I think before I loved art. And to see the Looney Tunes just walking, talking animals, but they're so anthropomorphic, they're so humanized that you almost forget. You just see those personalities. And you realize, he's just a bunny at the same time, or he's just a duck at the same time. The art, I think the art was so creative that even somebody like Yosemite Sam is like, he's a human, but you're like, is he really human? Like as a kid, I'm like, is he something as well? Then Tasmanian Devil, who looks nothing like a Tasmanian Devil, but he's you love that character because he's just the embodiment of chaos. I think as I'm watching Looney Tunes, like something pops up in my head, like the scene where the music for one, okay, so the that type of like music.
Yes. They basically still had orchestra music that is sort of like unheard of now. Now we get like generic generated AI generated music or something. It's just so vanilla. Go ahead.
But the music tells a story as well. With the Lion King as well, the music can tell a story. And then once the visuals on top of that is like a perfect dish, like all those ingredients just come together. But the adult themes that were in Looney Tunes, so I know they had more adult themes earlier on, but the scene where I think it's Mozart or something, I don't know, I'm not the smartest guy, but when Bugs is sitting down at the piano and every time he starts, this guy starts coughing in the crowd, and then eventually he couldn't take it anymore. He pulls out the gun and shoot the guy. Like, yeah, that's kind of crazy to think about, but never as a kid was I thinking I should just shoot somebody if they're getting on my nerves. It was just like, okay, I know all of this is absurd. When they, sticking dynamite in somebody's mouth and then blowing up. I'm seeing pictures in my head of when they would pull up the sign and then there'll be a donkey on it, but it's the butt showing. And or some character does something dumb and he'll look at the screen and his head turns into a donkey and he yee-haw. And now I know, okay, you're a jackass. But back then I was just a kid just watching some good stuff. Or like they'll pull up the card, a Looney Tune, and they have a screw and a ball, so screwball, stuff like that. It was way more intelligent than I think people give it credit for. It looks like just gags and antics. But like Bugs Bunny, for instance, when he's laughing, he's clearly getting the better of someone, but he says, "What an imbecile, what a maroon." So it's like, okay, he's not even saying these words right. Correct, but yeah.
Is it also part? I definitely. This is one of the reasons, and this exactly came up when we were talking with Mags. It's in a lot of ways because there was constraints, right? It was at different times, there were different eras. For lack of a better term, there was censorship. You were not allowed to say and do certain things.
Yes.
So in order to accomplish similar goals, you had to be more creative. Like exactly. I had to be more creative to call someone, a jackwagon, an imbecile, and all these other different things. I couldn't just say them. So I got to come up with other ways to do it. And then it's like cracking the code. I can get away with this. And that ends up having a life. You don't have kids yet, but I'm telling you, like, when you and your wife will start talking in code because you don't want the kids to know what you're talking about sometimes.
Okay.
It becomes like you can almost end up with like a whole second set of language that the two of you develop. Like my wife and I have phrases. Like if you wouldn't want to necessarily play password with us, right? We've been married for over 20 years. We could just say X and Y will automatically pop in our brain because the language has been established. The Looney Tunes did that over the decades of cracking these codes on what they could get away with. Like, well, we'll see. We have to be careful with what we do to Elmer, Fudd, and Sam because they're humans, but we can drop Wile E. Coyote off of cliff. That's no big deal because we have we have a set of rules here where no one actually dies. But we have to be careful how we show that if it's a human, because then it won't make sense, and we'd have to explain why it wouldn't make sense, things like that. So I think that gets us past Looney Tunes a little bit, but I'm still curious on like why do you still like, why does it still speak to you? Is it the archetypes of the characters? Is it the characters are just so believable? Like it's almost like when you're a writer, you create a character. You're really trying to write. I always, it used to be the thing. They used to actually have a Bible. They called it the Bible, right? It'd be the Bible. And it was like character. Here's Bugs Bunny. Here's all the things he's allowed to do. Here's the things he's not allowed to do. Here's some examples of who he's like or who he's based on, how he talks. Like there was all of this infrastructure created. And they hit the nail on the head so many times with Looney Tunes. Is that just it? Some things have survived and they're still not old to us.
Pops, I would say I do think I took these things for granted because they just happened. I grew up when there was just great animation just happening, creative, smart decisions being made. And now, as you're saying, like, yes, we had censorship back then, but now it's not censorship as in, okay, you can get away with that theme or you can say it, but you can't say it. Now it's just, you can't say it. You can't talk about this group. You can't use this language, just that. And if somebody tries, then you have all of these people on the internet that is like combing through this stuff for something to be offended by, and they'll call it out. And so you have people so afraid of that they're like, okay, I will just abide by the guidelines and follow the rules exactly, so we don't get that creativity. But as far as the Looney Tunes, it was the Looney Tunes, but I also had the Hanna-Barbera cartoons growing up. Like so many other, like I said, anthropomorphic characters, not always, but to put personalities on them, like Foghorn Leghorn, for instance. I like that. I like that character, but I didn't really relate to him until now that I'm older and I am around kids, and you see how they don't listen.
They do these crazy things to you. Yeah, that's why I quote. My kids are now old enough to get why I would love and quote Foghorn Leghorn so many times, because that was a joke in my house. Anytime I would get hurt, and I would always do this. There's a line in Foghorn Leghorn. I forget what machine they put him through, but he comes out the other side and he's been defeathered, and he just picks them up. And he just calmly goes, I keep my feathers numbered for just such an emergency. And that was my go-to for any time I hurt myself, was I would quote that line because it represented, well, I got to figure out how to put myself back together again.
That'll be nice, because now I'm thinking, okay, what would that look like? Okay, maybe if a character loses a leg, loses an eyeball or something, then maybe he can go into a closet and you see the shelves like labeled with their body part. He said, I'll be running out of these soon, or something like that.
Yeah, he has to go pick up the eyeball, and he goes back and he drops it in this little thing, and he picks it up, and he's like, okay, it says it has like an R on it or something. It's like he knows where to put it back because it's not the first time it's come out. Oh I think that's I love it.
Dismemberment in a way. So like when Bugs and Daffy doing the rabbit season, duck season,
rabbit season, duck season, rabbit season.
Yeah. And then the many ways that Daffy's beak would get blown off, and he has to put it on
way, sideways this way.
he has to like twist it back on. And I'm like, it's so creative, it's so absurd. But back to the personalities. So Foghorn, Yosemite Sam, that's a personality, and he can't curse, but he's like like you start to hear him like kind of just say these things to himself. I think that's what it was, the multiple personalities. And again, that is something that I love that Looney Tunes did, and something that I want to be able to accomplish. But they create this huge world. Like if you watch Space Jam, and if you look in the crowd, it's nothing but Looney Tunes. So all of those were characters who had some part in a Looney Tune series at some point. So to be able to have that much creativity to pump all of that out, not what we see now where people take a franchise and they just start putting little characters in there that don't make any sense, that break canon. This world has been created where all of these characters, now some of them were like copies of others, or you would see them like Elmer Fudd had a few copies, Yosemite Sam, Wile E. Coyote. Like, yes, they had copies, but for the most part, there were so many different characters and so many personalities that you're like, every time you see new characters interact, you're like, wow, I wonder how this is going to go.
And you kind of want more. Like I become like a fan of Gossamer, which is the big orange looking thing that has like sneakers on. And you're like, now I would never want anyone to touch it because I was afraid of what the backstory might actually be. But I feel like there's a whole planet full of Gossamers running around and a story that needs to be told. Things like that.
He was like a Frankenstein's monster.
Yeah. But you feel like there's more to that story or something, or there's some sort of like weird. I can do something. I can come up with a story for sure. It takes me to like other franchises though, because don't you like Avatar, Airbender, and stuff like that too, right? Is it just the world building as well holds up so much because the rules are well defined, the characters are well defined, there's good and evil, there's stakes. What are some of the things that you think matter more that like live action just can't seem to get right?
So with Avatar, I definitely think world building. So when you say live action, usually it's a movie that comes out. And so with a movie, you have a very short time to give the audience as much information as you can in a way that's palpable. And you're not just overloading them. Like, you want to see the action. That's another thing that I think animation does. Like when you spoke about the Batman thing, my issue, and I don't want to jump around the place. So I'll answer that question, but then remind me to go back to the Batman, please.
No problem there, because I love talking about the Batman show.
Okay, so
I'm in deep on the Batman show right now. Yeah.
Okay. So the world building for Avatar was, I think, and I got the book like back here, because I'm studying these things. So I got the book, I got notes from the creator, all that type of stuff, the early art. Beautiful. That's beautiful. Beautiful story, beautiful series. I think with that, Avatar blended the West and the East perfectly. They gave us like superheroes or like an ensemble cast, as well as the anime like art style, the powers that you see, the what's that, like, not necessarily prophecy, but like old stories that have relevance to today.
Folklore.
Folklore. Yes.
Mysticism, folklore, things of that nature definitely play very, very big into the Avatar series. Absolutely.
Yes. I think that was, for the most part, it, as well as the art style. It has to be attractive for people to even pay attention to. I won't, 9 times out of 10, I won't read a comic book if I don't like the art, unless somebody is just like, oh, you got to read this. Then I'll suffer through it. But yeah, I judge books by their cover. If I don't like the art, I won't give it a chance. And I think Avatar did that perfectly. But with the world building, that series, so you have this huge world, but they gave us a series that focused on this part of it. So because they did a great job at world building, now they have all of the rest of this history and future of this world to explore. And a lot of people hate the The Legend of Korra, the continuation, the sequel series. And yes, it has its issues, but because they did such a great job at world building, we can easily explore past avatars. And you can learn, or you can love Avatar again, because Avatar is not just Aang, it's he's constantly being reincarnated. So there's so many opportunities, and the studio knows this because they're making movies, and there is a series coming out with the next Avatar. But I think world building, and that goes back to the Looney Tunes, world building, it gives you the opportunity to produce a lot of content, not milking it for milking its sake, or just making things up as you go, which end up contradicting things that have already happened. So I hope to answer your question.
No, you absolutely answered the question. I think, because I'm such a firm believer in that too. Like, it doesn't seem like there's right now there's such a rush to just generate content. Let me mix up the next batch of gruel and shove it in your mouth. That there's no pause for me to create something that had a moment's thought on why it was ever there to begin with. It was just like, just do it. We can go to Batman because I know we're running a little long on time. I want to get to Batman because I'm a Batman aficionado, right? So, like, I've always said 50% of all my comics was Batman and everything else was 50%. That's how weighted my life has always been with Batman. And as I dove back into animated series in chronological order, the creators were so brilliant. I am literally like 14 or 15 episodes in. There's still no Penguin or Riddler. Killer Croc, Mad Hatter, Ventriloquist. Like, we're dealing with episodes and like these little two-parters, introduce a character, doing like it really feels like the comic book universe. And this is what you're going to hit on, I'm sure, because you definitely have this sort of affinity like myself. Is they took almost like generic, like Mr. Freeze and Poison Ivy in particular, the two that have come to mind so far, and elevated them to next level villains. Like, before Heart of Ice, Mr. Freeze was like, he's an okay villain. But after Heart of Ice, everything changes. Like, it's a completely different thing. They use the media of animation to create a different expansion of his legacy and his like you said, world building. They made it differently. And they do add original characters. I just did the episode on Renee Montoya was a new character. Harley Quinn, of course, was a new character. Things like that. But it was two different approaches. I've said this I don't know if you do the Saturday morning cartoons with Pops. So it's X-Men animated series and Batman animated series. I've been going through them like weeks at a time. And Batman is about expanding their Batman universe and trying different things, interesting new characters. Whereas X-Men is always pointing towards what's already existed and merchandise. They were trying to sell stuff, right? So if you watch X-Men animated through the lens, you say, oh, this is pointing to this comic book series, and we're going to make these action figures. And, oh, we just talked about Bishop, so we need to make sure we have him in this story, even though the original story didn't have him in it. But that's why we're squeezing him in, because we need him to be tied to the new comic book series. And it really does make sense. Two completely different approaches, and yet both are very sound in what they accomplish, in my opinion.
I definitely agree with that, because and I haven't watched Batman in a long time, but I recall in my brain, my kid brain, it seemed like you're watching like a drama. It's action, there's a lot of action going on. Joker was comedy. Him and Harley, it hit a lot of genres. Whereas I think with X-Men, it was just superhero for superhero's sake. And I recall when I did see Mr. Sinister show up, I was like, okay, who is this guy? He hasn't been properly introduced. I do feel like the X-Men series just threw stuff out there and assumed that you knew, as opposed to Batman, where it was like, yeah, there are comics, but we want to give it to people as if they don't have the comics, and explain these things and expand this world for them so that they can be interested and go check out these comics. Whereas the X-Men series was just, okay, the character, here he is, or here they are. But with the Batmans,
Batman's spending like whole episodes or 2 episodes on an origin story, right? So they're giving you the Clayface origin story. You don't have to never have read a Clayface comic book, Batman versus Clayface, to get it. They'll do a whole 2-episode sequence. But you're absolutely right. Mr. Sinister is just like abruptly thrown into the mix. No one explains how he has powers or what his powers even are or why this power. So like in this, there's a battle and like you have no explanation on why this works against him, but why Cyclops does work. And stuff just keeps happening. And I'm not even saying it was bad. I just say they have two completely different approaches on how they're doing things. That's interesting too. I don't know that I noticed as much the lack of explanation sometimes. So they do just gloss over things a lot. Yeah, go ahead.
So I guess 2 points, and Batman is my example. So with the suspension of belief, for instance, you will see a character and he gets thrown into a building and the bricks break. And you're just like, that should have killed him. Like, he should be suffering some real internal damage, at least, if not the outer parts of him are broken. But that would just happen to all heroes, and you just took it as normal. They are superior. And kids are looking at that like, I want to be like that. I want to be strong. I want to be able to take damage like that because I will get into fights. I will have to defend people. Bad people are out there. I want to be able to handle what they throw at me. Whereas in a movie, then you see, like, you don't really see scenes like that. You don't see, my issue with superhero movies is you don't see the superhero-ness be a normal part of them. There are, I guess, like moments in the movie to where origin story, or he's some lame guy who's, whatever. And then he might fight a big bad at 1 or 2 points in the movie, but you don't really get to see the superhero-ness of them and see it just be normal. So with that, you don't actually have rogues galleries in these movies. And I think that's another issue, or you're saying like the, what I was saying with animation doesn't have their same restrictions as live action. Then you have to find actors to play these characters. You got to figure out, okay, at what movie, if we're even going to do more than one movie, at what movie do we introduce these other villains, these other characters, as opposed to animation, where it's just villain of the week, villain of the day.
Because worst case scenario is you don't even put dialogue in. You just show a silhouette of one of the characters that are in the Arkham Asylum cell. There's no voice actor that was involved. They just put the character in. Whereas with a movie, I got to call AJ in, and AJ's like, no, listen, man, I got 2 other movies going on. I got time for that. Or you're Henry Cavill who wanted $250,000, and he negotiated that for a little, cameo clip. And I get it. I get the constraints and some of the problems, but I do, and you're absolutely right. These are some of the things that animation can do that live action really can't touch, and definitely they're not doing well if that's the case. But all right, well, we've kind of gone to our point with our time, so I don't want to get too much further along. We're going to have to do more of this again because I don't even think we barely scratched the surface of some of this. We have not. But an hour goes by fast. I know we end up talking about other stuff too, but folks, all of his stuff is below. Make sure you sub and connect to this guy. The Saturday show, Superheroes No Cape, is just tremendous. I'm always catching that. But he's also showing up on other people's shows. He's doing other stuff. And I can't wait for his own creations and comic books and lores and stuff to come our way. So stay tuned for that as well. But I am Pops. This is What's Your Story. I appreciate all of your guys' time. You mean the world to me. Thank you so much for doing this. Thanks to AJ for being with me. I appreciate you so much, and we'll see you next time.